BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia at heart and from around the globe. And hello everybody, today is Monday, another Zodiac Monday. Welcome to the show. How's everybody doing? I hope everyone had a good weekend, and it is nice to be back on the Zodiac Killer News Report. For the last 2 weeks, I did different segments for Zodiac Monday. I did an episode on Richard Hoffman, which was more or less a direct response to the J-Foy videos that were put out on TikTok, talking about Richard Hoffman as a Zodiac Killer suspect. And last week I had the opportunity to interview Scott Bobbitt, talking all about his observations in regards to the Zodiac Killer mystery, particularly the greeting cards, about how the Zodiac may have hidden secret messages within the greeting cards. But it's always great to do a Zodiac Killer news report and talk about some things that are in the Zodiac world. The Zodiac Killer was a serial killer who operated in California in 1968 and 69. Whatever happened before or after that is still part of the mystery. Not only was the Zodiac a serial killer, but he also wrote letters, created ciphers, diagrams, greeting cards, and he made phone calls, taking credit for these crimes. And just a few more announcements about the channel. The first is actually just saying thank you to everyone who listened to the D.B. Cooper live stream that I did on Friday. That was the first one that I've done talking about D.B. Cooper going live, and every Friday is Cooper Friday on Black Box Online Radio. Every Wednesday is Ripper Wednesday, talking about Jack the Ripper. And for the summer, I've been going live on Tuesdays and Thursdays for True Crime Talk Radio in the morning, and this is the big announcement. There will be an episode of True Crime Talk Radio tomorrow, but it will be pre-recorded because I will be discussing the case of the Freeway Phantom. So if you want to follow along with all of these discussions, you can hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. You can also go through some of the links in the description box. One of them is for buymeacoffee.com, buymeacoffee.com/blackboxnid88, and that allows you to make a donation or contribution to help support the show. And anybody who makes a donation will get a shout out on Zodiac Monday. The first thing that I would like to do in this episode is respond to the San Francisco Chronicle's video that features Kevin Fagan, the journalist who has covered the Zodiac Killer mystery. I'm going to play the entire video, and it's about 7 minutes long, and then let's have some responses. And if you have any thing that you would like to share, put your ideas in the comment section down below. What do you think about any of his comments? And it always makes for an interesting discussion.
I get asked a lot how covering the Zodiac affects me personally. Notices and emails saying, I've got a tip where I've solved this thing, I can't give you my real name, meet me at a certain place at a certain time and I'll reveal everything. It's stressful. Hi, I'm Kevin Fagan, and I'm a longtime reporter at the San Francisco Chronicle. I've been covering the Zodiac Killer case for about 30 years. I got onto it when I was covering the Unabomber case, and I got a letter from someone saying they thought the Unabomber was the Zodiac. Well, I wrote a story. I can certainly say, no, the Zodiac was not the Unabomber. But once that story ran, my editors said, well, you're now the Zodiac reporter. Today, I'll be going through some tips and theories that came in on Reddit, and I'll give you my reaction. I heard a theory that the Zodiac doesn't actually exist and was actually someone who worked at the newspaper the letters were sent to, who also had access to case files. So the Zodiac murders are actually independent incidents that were all brought together by the Zodiac letters, and the letters were written by a guy at the newspaper. What's your opinion on this? My opinion is that that's ridiculous. It's in the category of other theories where the Zodiac is crazy uncle down the street, the nutball who lives upstairs, no, it's a bunch of cops, no, it's Charlie Manson, it's the Unabomber again. Sure, you can guess all kinds of things, but that one, absolutely sure. No one at the paper did this. Do you think that cracking these 40-plus-year-old ciphers will actually help to shed light on who the Zodiac Killer was, or do they just serve as interesting pieces of history? I don't know. I know one of the biggest ones has been solved, and it's just crazy ramblings by a killer. You know, I like killing, the most dangerous game is man, you know, yammering on like that. I've had dozens, if not hundreds, of solutions sent to me where people were absolutely sure they've solved it. And the ciphers all lead to this name or that name or another name. Most importantly, the FBI, which is the final word on this in America, only verified a couple of these things. Now here's a question that comes up a lot. Where does the majority of this sub lean towards in regard to if you definitely think this case is too old to solve at this point, and if the killer will become lost to history if not already? Now, I wouldn't just confine it to this sub. I think that's a question that comes up everywhere for people who pay attention to the Zodiac case. It's getting old. Whoever did the killings could still be alive, clearly. And until we reach that point where the killer would be 100 years old, 110 certainly, then you're not going to get a confession unless you find some secret diary somewhere, which people have said they have found, and the authorities have never confirmed any of those, because this comes up quite a bit, that someone has done writings saying I am the Zodiac, and then the police, the investigators look in it and they can't nail it in. So no case is ever really done until it's done. Look at Jack the Ripper. That one's more than a century old and people are still scraping over it. Jack the Ripper is Britain's version of our Zodiac Killer here. They're really the most enduring, unsolved serial killings for these countries. The bottom line is, yeah, he could be alive, but stopping cold turkey doesn't make a whole lot of sense for the motivation in the brain of a serial killer. Now here's one that I frankly found kind of irritating, and I try not to provoke the Zodiac sleuth community because I think a lot of them are very sincere. Most of them are very sincere about what they're trying to solve and trying to get across. So have you ever seen Ted Cruz and the Zodiac Killer at the same place at the same time? So in other words, is Ted Cruz, the senator, the Zodiac Killer? No. This treats a really serious string of murders as infotainment. You don't make jokes about this stuff. You don't treat it as something to tee-hee about on the internet. No, there are real people who are dead. And everyone who dies in a murder leaves behind a string of relatives and friends who are filled with anguish. It's trauma that goes through generations. Not something to joke about. Doing the Zodiac beat, as it were, is strange. I get hundreds of tips every year from people in the email, phone calls, snail mail, hand-created books. It's astounding to me how much interest there still is in this. That having been said, the newspapers do have an unbidden role in all this stuff. We got letters from the Zodiac. We got a manifesto written by the Unabomber. The big dilemma is, do you run this? Do you want to be the mouthpiece for a killer? It's a real tough one, because you're not running the Zodiac letters and the Unabomber letter to, entertain people. It has to be done for the public good. And we don't work in concert with the authorities, with the FBI or the police. Our job is to be a watchdog on those agencies. But when a killer is involved, the public good really takes precedence. And so we do consult with the cops on whether we collectively think it's a good idea to run a letter that is from a killer. That's a very tough decision. It has to help lead to some kind of solution in the crime, or at least try to lead to it. With the Unabomber, the New York Times, Washington Post, and we ran the manifesto that he wrote, which was his diatribe against modern technology. Well, that led to his being busted, because his brother and brother's wife read it and said, that's Ted, our brother Ted Kaczynski. Led to him being arrested. That wouldn't have happened if that manifesto had not gone out widely. Now, as far as the Zodiac letters, thousands of people think that reading those letters, because they were made public, has led to their solutions. Maybe one of them got it right. I don't know. when the FBI and the police departments say, yes, they got it right, we've solved it, then we know.
And one more time, that was Kevin Fagan from the San Francisco Chronicle. Okay, so I have some immediate responses, and I'd like to begin with the positives before the negatives. The first is that I commend him for calling out the Ted Cruz Zodiac Killer joke by saying that that's not funny, and I wasn't so much offended the way that Kevin Fagan was by it. When people first started saying that Ted Cruz was the Zodiac Killer, I was just simply confused by it. I was perplexed. I didn't understand why anyone would even make such a crappy joke, because obviously Ted Cruz was born after the Zodiac Killer murders happened. As I said in the intro, the Zodiac was a serial killer in 1968 and 69, and Ted Cruz was born in 1970, and I was like, all right, I get that you're trying to be funny, but this doesn't even work. It doesn't even make sense. It's kind of just a giant question mark for me. But in all seriousness, it goes to show that facts can turn into fiction. I saw a fascinating presentation once at a university when a guy was actually giving his thesis presentation, and it was on history, and he wanted to look at how does history become historical fiction. Well, over time, people start fudging the facts a little bit. People start turning things into entertainment. And I think that maybe in 100 years, unless they identify the Zodiac Killer, there might be a lot more fiction associated with the case, because with the Jack the Ripper mystery, countless novels have been written about Jack the Ripper. And I was watching Drew Beeson's show, the Zodcast, once, and someone asked him a Jack the Ripper question, and it was, what is the name of the Sherlock Holmes villain that is based on Jack the Ripper? And I mean, my simple response is Sherlock Holmes has gone up against Jack the Ripper multiple times. And yeah, of course, there's the video game called Sherlock Holmes versus Jack the Ripper, but Jack the Ripper is the villain in a study in terror, excuse me. And there's even a German novel series that features Sherlock Holmes and Jack the Ripper by Jan Gaspard. And well, I mean, this is just another example about how real stories happen, real crimes happened, and slowly they evolve and then they turn into historical fiction. And I hope that doesn't happen with the Zodiac Killer mystery. I hope that the case will be solved soon. Now, the next point, though, is something that I want to be critical of. This guy, Kevin Fagan, is responding to the question about the Zodiac Killer hoax theory. You heard him address that there. That was the first thing that came up. What do you think of the idea that the Zodiac Killer never existed, and that these were unconnected crimes, and somebody was writing letters taking credit for crimes that he didn't commit? And he just said it's ridiculous. He said, no, it's outlandish. It's on par with Charlie Manson orchestrating the Zodiac murders. And my simple response to anybody who is going to be promoting that type of stuff is, well, why? If you're going to say that somebody is wrong, why not provide some reasons? No, you get to a certain point when you might find something that is a little bit too extreme and just say, I'm not going to entertain that idea. Like, say, for example, if you were to tell me that the Zodiac Killer was a ghost, or aliens and UFOs were involved in the Zodiac Killer mystery, sure. But to just say that the Zodiac murders were a set of unconnected crimes that were united by the letters, well, this is a theory that is out there. It's called the Zodiac Killer hoax theory. It's the subject of the book and documentary The Myth of the Zodiac Killer, done by Thomas Horan. Just provide the reasons why you think that that's wrong. And he really left that out. And he also brought it up again when he talks about how it's the group of police officers, because this is not Thomas Horan's theory, but this is a different version of that there were a group of criminals. It's called the Policeman Thrill Kill Club theory, and I talked about it a little bit with Richard Hoffman in the Richard Hoffman episode, but this would be that there were a group of people who committed these crimes, and they tried to make people think that it was one person, and they were police officers that were abusing the badge. They were using their knowledge of investigations and forensics to destroy the crime scenes. And I'm really surprised that this isn't more widely discussed in response to the J. Foy videos when he's talking about Richard Hoffman as a Zodiac Killer suspect, because people are like, wait, how could Richard Hoffman be at the Blue Rock Springs crime scene, find Darlene Ferrin's body, ride in the ambulance with her to the hospital? She's pronounced it at 12:38 a.m., and then the Zodiac Killer makes a call at 12:40 a.m., saying that he is responsible for the murder. How would he be able to get to the payphone to make that call? Well, it was a group, it was a crew, it was multiple killers. It's what I call the group murder theory, and I talked about this a lot in 2019, 2020, so I don't want to go over it too much, but the fact of the matter is, if you're going to say that somebody is wrong, Just give the specific reasons. You might want to say that all of the evidence can be explained by a single killer. And, you can also point out that it is not required. There is not anything that contradicts itself. Like if we had DNA from different people at every single crime scene, like if they had lifted touch DNA off the shell casings at Lake Herman Road, and then they had touch DNA from the car at Lake Berryessa. We're not even talking about fingerprints now. I mean DNA of different people at every single crime scene. That might be something that would indicate that there are multiple killers. But you'd be like, no, all of this can be answered by a single perpetrator. Then that is something that, it's defendable, and we don't necessarily know because this is still an unsolved mystery. But if you guys have any direct responses to Kevin Fagan's video, as well as any comments about the Zodiac hoax theory, I would love to read them down below. And I'm going to stay with this one because there is a new video on Drew Beeson's channel, and Drew Beeson did an interview with Thomas Henry Horan, whom I was just discussing, the author of The Myth of the Zodiac Killer. And I have to give a shout out to Cat Daddy Steve, who asked something very good in the chat. For a while, Thomas Henry Horan has been making comments about the Lake Herman Road murders, the murders of David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen on December 20th of 1968, the first confirmed crime committed by the Zodiac Killer. And what he claimed is that prior to the Lake Herman Road murders, at least 12 people were found dead in that parking lot turn-off area on Lake Herman Road. And Cat Daddy Steve asked Thomas Horan to provide the source, or to give some more of an explanation as to what happened, because I think you guys can see the insinuation. He's saying that it's a high crime area, it's drug related, it's maybe even gang related, talking about biker gangs. I first heard this back in 2021 when I interviewed Thomas Horan for the Zodiac Killer channel, and he said that there were a dozen bodies that were found at that Lake Herman Road turnoff at over a period of time, not at once. And I said, is that really true? Like what are you going on about? And his response was that he learned about it in a conversation with a detective, and Cat Daddy Steve just asked him to elaborate, but unfortunately he did not. And I don't really know why he wouldn't. I really don't know why he would not use that opportunity and, just share how you learned that, provide the source, provide the explanation. And I don't see any reason to keep information like that to yourself. And all you have to do is just say, well, I was talking to this person and they shared these stories with me, because, as I said, he says he learned this from a conversation with either one detective or multiple detectives, and they were sharing the information with him. Okay, well, put it out there. There's no reason to hold on to it and then put it behind a paywall. Okay, maybe there are reasons, but they're not good ones. And this is also one of the reasons why I have not written a Zodiac Killer book, and I don't plan to for the near future, because I just give you guys everything. Every Monday on Zodiac Monday, I tell you all of my observations about the Zodiac Killer mystery, and so on. But, if anything, though, it's an interesting discussion between Drew Beeson and Thomas Henry Horan. And Drew Beeson was one of the panelists on the most recent French Wrecking Crew episode. We have started a panel discussion show on the French Wrecking Crew. The French Wrecking Crew is run by Jerome, and there will be a new episode of that coming out on, well, actually, probably would even be Monday evening, depending on your time zone. For me, it's going to be Tuesday morning, but we will be doing a new episode of that this weekend. Please go over and subscribe to the French Wrecking Crew. And Ray Grant has also released 2 new videos on his YouTube channel. Ray Grant is the author of Zodiac Killer Solved, and he did a very big video series last year about the Zodiac Killer crime scenes, walkthroughs of each of the events, as well as talking about some of the unconfirmed Zodiac crimes. And he's released 2 new videos. One of them was about the Bates Had to Die letters that were written in 1967, also called the Loose Leaf letters. The ones that say, Bates had to die, there will be more, and they are signed with a Z. And the other one was about D.B. Cooper, actually. And he gave me a shout-out in both of those. So much appreciated to Ray Grant. And he said he wanted to share some of his observations about D.B. Cooper, because I've been talking about D.B. Cooper a lot on the Friday episodes. Now, Ray and Grant and I are in some disagreement about the Bates Had to Die letters. And he, well, let's just look at some of the points. And firstly, in Ray Grant's video, he stated very clearly that some people seem shocked that he looks at the Riverside connection, that maybe the Zodiac Killer didn't start committing crimes in 1969. Maybe he actually began in 1966 with the murder of Sherry Jo Bates. I should have said 1968, but he may have actually began in 1966. with the murder of Sherry Jo Bates, and that after the Bates had to die, after the Bates murder, there was the Riverside Confession that's mailed in November of 1966. There was a desktop poem that was discovered in 1966 in December. And then in 1967, there are the 3 loose leaf letters that either say Bates had to die, there will be more, or she had to die, there will be more, and signed with a Z. And there should be no outrage for exploring this connection, because this is not one of the outrageous connections in the Zodiac Killer mystery. And even if some way, somehow we learned that the Zodiac Killer actually did murder Sherry Jo Bates, even though I don't believe he did, but if we did learn that, I wouldn't be shocked at all. Sherry Jo Bates was even featured as a confirmed victim of the Zodiac on Tom Voigt's website, zodiackiller.com, and countless people have explored the Riverside connection. Michael Butterfield has talked about it a lot, and I mean, I've done numerous episodes on the Riverside connection. I'm just not the biggest believer in it for a couple reasons. Now, one point, though, that I would challenge Ray Grant on is that he stated in his video that the letters say Bates had to die, there will be more, and they're signed with a Z. But not everyone believes that. He said it's universally accepted that there are these letters that are signed with a Z. No, I mean, countless people have disputed that. Countless people have talked about how they don't think that that's a Z. I mean, this is even brought up in Robert Graysmith's Zodiac book when he says it might be the number 32. Yeah, it looks like a Z with a squiggle on the top, and the fact that it was written 3 times on 3 different letters means it's pretty clear that the person intentionally tried to write this symbol in a particular way. I don't think that it was accidentally created or he's just messing around, but, I mean, let's look at some of the other possibilities. Number 1, it was 32 because Arthur Lee Allen lived at 32 Fresno Street. Number 2, giving a shout out to Playtime, who was talking about how this could come from the Theban alphabet. Playtime believed that this was not the letter Z at all. He says in the Theban alphabet, which is used in witchcraft, it's actually the Theban L. It's a letter L. And this is, witchcraft connection, October 30th, right before Halloween and so on. And one day I'm going to go through the book, The Theban Oracle, and just really try to get to the bottom of that, find out one way or another, yay or nay. But with the Theban alphabet, I actually think the letter Z, the Theban letter Z, also resembles the Bates had to die letter Z. But, I mean, this is just an example of someone who has disputed this point or is challenging someone. And then you even have people like Gary Stewart saying that it's a combination of the letters E and V because his suspect was Earl Van Best Jr., Earl and Van. And Earl Van Best Jr. went by the name Van. That's how he was commonly known. At least that's what it says in Gary Stewart's book. And he's like, it's an E and V put together, Earl and Van. And you're going to find lots of examples, like even Druser, Andrew Gray, has talked about this by saying that he thought that it was just the writer testing his pen at the end of the page, like he's just kind of doing something silly like a signature. It might not have even been designed to be a letter Z. But other than that, I mean, I thought Ray Grant's video was fairly solid, and he's giving his take on the subject, and I always appreciate new forms of commentary about the Zodiac Killer. Because I've been talking about Riverside, I would like to just pick up with something about the desktop poem, giving a shout out to Simon, who sent this message to the Instagram page, blackboxonlineradio over on Instagram, and Simon asked me about, or more or less just sharing the info about how the desktop poem was discovered in December of 1966. It says, sick of living, unwilling to die, blood spilled all over her dress, oh well, it was red anyway. Yes, I'm jumping around a little bit, but those are some of the words that are in the desktop poem. And the desktop poem is signed R.H. And, I mean, Simon was just saying that R is the 18th letter of the alphabet, and H is the 8th letter of the alphabet. And, I mean, if I've ever seen that before, I had forgotten about that. He's like, hey, Ned, did you know about this? And I drew an enormous blank on that. 20 minutes later, Ray Grant's video came up on YouTube, and he's talking about R is the 18th letter of the alphabet, H is the 8th letter of the alphabet, 18-8-26. So giving a shout out to both Simon and Ray Grant. And Ray Grant said that Tom Voigt has posted it years ago. Maybe I had seen it before, but it just kind of slipped my mind or something. But yes, R-H, 18-8. 18 plus 8 equals 26. Z is the 26th letter of the alphabet. And when I look at stuff like that, I begin to think that it all makes sense. Now, you guys know very clearly I don't believe the Zodiac Killer murdered Sherry Jo Bates, but let's put this in a sequence of events. The Zodiac stabs Sherry Jo Bates to death on October 30th. then he writes a typed confession saying that, he is the murderer of Sherry Jo Bates. Miss Bates had to die. She was stupid. She went to the slaughter like a lamb. And he is expressing a lot of demented and twisted rage in the confession letter. Then you have the desktop poem where he writes out about blood spilling all over her dress, and it's signed RH, 18/8/26. So it goes from RH in December of 66 to the spring of 1967. Now, the Z is written at the bottom as a signature. The 18 and the 8 have been combined to equal 26, which is the 26th letter of the alphabet, Z. And then this is going to be something that's even more expansive, and Ray Grant talked all about this in his video when he said that the word zodiac contains the number pi, like 3.14 and so on. Was it 3.1415926? Don't ever ask me math questions. I don't know any math. But the alphanumeric value of pi is contained within the word zodiac. So RH, Z, zodiac, mathematical signatures, and the combination of numbers were created. And this is what clues in a lot of people to think that there were deliberate signatures that were created by the Zodiac Killer. Never mind that the Zodiac gave himself this name, that he chose this name because it's all about signatures. He wrote a message on the car door at Lake Berryessa because it's all about a signature. And what do you think about this? Do you think that the 18/8 is going to be resembling 26, or not resembling, that 18 and 8 is a direct signature which is meant to signify 26. So please put your idea in the comment section down below. And next I would like to give a shout out to Mike Rodelli, who informed me that there is a new Zodiac Killer book out called One Night in October by Gerald Gregory Doane. And Doane, might be Doane, or Dwayne, but I'm going to call him Gerald Gregory Doane. And this one is written by someone who was one of the investigators on the case. And I'm just going to read the description real fast. This could be one that I'll explore in the future, but it is currently only available in paperback, and lately I've become a very big fan of electronic books. One Night in October, a stunning new profile of the California Zodiac executioner, his motive revealed. In October 1969, I was one of 25 or more San Francisco Police Department officers who responded to the murder of a yellow cab driver in Presidio Heights, in San Francisco. Investigators later attributed the murder to the so-called Zodiac Killer. Long after my police career, I began studying 5 Zodiac cases. Yeah, it says that I began studying 5 Zodiac cases, his phone calls, and his written communications. I concluded that the motive in 4 of the murder and attempted murder cases, consisting of Lake Herman Road, Blue Rock Springs, Lake Berryessa, and the Presidio Heights district in San Francisco, totaling 7 victims, were cases of displaced or redirected aggression. Follow my leads and come to your own conclusion. One more time, the book is called One Night in October. And I greatly appreciate Mike Rodelli sharing this, but, I mean, what do you make of this, though, that the Zodiac is all dealing with redirected aggression? I'd say so. I don't think that there's much of an alternative, unless it actually is something that is purely designed for just creating a criminal masterpiece loaded with mathematical signatures. But you would think that if somebody is going to go to the point of murder, then they're dealing with some type of rage-filled issues. I completely understand about how some people think that the Zodiac didn't hate women, he didn't hate men. They think that he wasn't a sad, lonely man, and this was done for a calculating reason. But if it's going to escalate to the point of murder, there must be some type of rage and aggression issue going on. That's just my take on the subject. You can put your ideas in the comment section down below. Let's look at a different murderer, the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski. He is someone who would have dealt with a lot of sexual repression, sexual frustration, all types of rage and aggression. And Mark Hewitt talks about this a lot in his book Exposed, when he just says that Ted Kaczynski, tried to destroy his neighbor's house with an axe, just started chopping away at the axe and with the axe to the wall of his neighbor's house when they were out of town, just freaking out all the time. And yes, Ted Kaczynski is a calculated serial killer. He made very calculated attempts. Things were very specifically designed with the Unabomber. The kind of guy that is going to go from Montana to Utah just to mail a package and so on. But with what he's actually experiencing internally, rage and aggression, absolutely. So with the Zodiac, I think that it would be somewhat similar. And, this is, again, the stuff that I wish Kevin Fagan had elaborated on in his video that I played at the beginning. All right, if you think that Ted Kaczynski is not a good Zodiac suspect, well, why don't you provide the reasons? If you think that Charles Manson is not a good suspect for orchestrating the Zodiac murders, and yes, that was the thesis statement of the Zodiac Manson connection by Howard Davis, that Charles Manson orchestrated this and organized everything. I mean, as far as that goes, I just don't think there is any way to place Charles Manson or the family in those specific places in 1969. It seems like everything the Manson family is doing is in Southern California, and nobody slips up. No one has ever slipped up and said, oh yeah, Charlie sent Bruce up to San Francisco. You don't hear anything like that in the interviews, at least not in the ones that I've heard. So that almost is like it's going in the wrong direction, but Kevin Fagan didn't even do that, and okay, maybe I'm getting a little bit hyped up about that particular point, and I don't mean to beat a dead horse, so to speak. And right now I would like to get to your supporter shoutouts on buymeacoffee.com, and you can also use the super thanks here on YouTube and the super chats for the live streams, which usually come out on Tuesdays and Thursdays. As I said, though, tomorrow there'll be an episode on the Freeway Phantom. The first one comes to us from Batman66. Batman66, thank you so much for your regular and consistent support. And next we have River Prawn Pottery. You two guys are amazing. I appreciate everything. And we have one on buymeacoffee.com from Sam Fisher. And Sam, I thank you as well. And Sam has also become a very regular supporter. And I would like to give a shout out to Dennis G, who has been helping a lot find the images for the show that are going by. A lot of the images that are found are done by Dennis G. And just a big thank you to everyone who has been following this channel, and I'm going to be doing some more interviews. I did a couple interviews about Jack the Ripper and D.B. Cooper, but I'm going to be relaunching the interview series in the very near future. And I would actually like, though, to pick up with something that was briefly discussed, though, on Drew Beeson's live stream with Thomas Horan. And Thomas Horan briefly mentioned the murder of Doreen Gul, and this is one that I've been somewhat exposed to, but I confess I'm not an expert on this particular case. The Zodiac connection exists with the suspect Bruce Davis, whom I just mentioned, who is the key player in the Zodiac Manson connection. And I would like to go over to derangedlacrimes.com, just citing the source, and this is going to help us out. On Saturday, November 22nd, a man living in Pico Union found the mutilated bodies of Doreen Gul, age 19, and James Sharp, age 15, in an alley between Arapahoe Street and Magnolia Avenue south of 11th Street. Doreen was naked except for a string of multicolored beads, hippie beads, de rigueur, for teenage girls in 1969. James wore a corduroy jacket, striped t-shirt, and black Levi's, the uniform of a teenage boy. Bodies of teenage girl and boy were found in a downtown alley. Someone stabbed Doreen and James between 50 and 60 times each. 17 of the stab wounds inflicted on Doreen were near her heart. She was raped, their right eyes cut out, and the overkill recalled the Tate LaBianca murders in August, but the police uncovered no link between Doreen and James and the other victims. And as I said, Bruce Davis is the subject of the Zodiac Manson connection. He was referred to as Charles Manson's right-hand man, but what are people doing when they're trying to push these types of Zodiac Killer lengths? I mean, this woman is stripped naked and raped. Terrible, terrible what happened to her. Rest in peace to Doreen, and rest in peace to James, the male victim. But I just don't see how there's an ounce of Zodiac signature. Not to mention the overkill. This is something that people will point out all the time. These excessive amounts of stab wounds. The Zodiac did nothing like that at Lake Berryessa. And I'm not trying to put down anybody's tragedy, but I mean, this is just a different type of story. But this continues, though, with a Scientology connection, and that's one of the reasons why Bruce Davis gets pulled into this, because Bruce Davis allegedly had connections to the Process Church and the Church of Scientology, although he disputes some of that. Scientology was founded in 1950 by L. Ron Hubbard, and it was attractive to baby boomers and teenagers in the 1960s who sought spiritual guidance in non-traditional religions, communes, and radical political ideologies. In Los Angeles, Scientology provided a communal living arrangement in a few of the old mansions in Pico Union and MacArthur Park. Doreen lived at 1032 South Bonnie Bray Street, and James lived less than a quarter of a mile away at 921 South Bonnie Bray Street. On the evening of the murders, Doreen left the Theaton Manor to meet with James, and he was going to audit her. Okay. For those of you unfamiliar with the basic tenets of Scientology, Satan is an immortal spiritual being, the human soul. An audit is conducted by a Scientology minister or minister in training who uses an e-meter, electropsychometer, to locate and confront areas of spiritual upset. For Scientologists, the e-meter is a religious artifact used as a spiritual guide. E-meters are more sophisticated today than they were in 1969. They were nothing more than a galvanometer with two tin cans, not unlike many quack devices marketed to the gullible. Well, it says the slayings of two cultists may be linked to a third. The police charge leaders of Scientology Church as they try to block the investigation. So, it sounds like there is a very big story here with the murder of Doreen Gul, as well as the murder of her friend here, James. But let's just keep going. Let's see how this is going to play out. The mainstream press characterized Scientology as a cult and a mystical quasi-scientific organization. The organization cooperated with the Los Angeles Police Department at first, but dragged their feet when asked to provide a comprehensive membership list. LAPD detective Lieutenant Earl A. Deemer wanted to explore any possible connection between the murders of Doreen and James and a Jane Doe slaying from several months before. The marked similarities in the three murders struck Deemer as more than a coincidence. He described the crime to reporters as all three victims were stabbed, all of their wounds appeared to be the work of a fanatic, and none of these three were slain where the bodies were found. The Jane Doe of the previous killing wore hippie-like attire which resembled that in which Miss Gull had been seen in, and which is favored among many young females. Deemer wanted to talk to L. Ron Hubbard personally about the membership list, but the Scientology was adrift at sea, literally. He was on a private yacht to avoid a hefty tax bill that awaited him on land. You do what you have to do, L. Ron Hubbard. On behalf of Scientology, Reverend Natalie Fisher, resident agent of the organization at 2773 West Temple Street, stated that this organization has no facts and information regarding the circumstances of the crime. And I want to be very clear, I don't think that detective was directly insinuating that L. Ron Hubbard was the killer or anything like that, or that they were even murdered because of some type of Scientology-related issue. It sounds more like there was, again, someone who was acting like a maniac, someone who was very deranged, and maybe through the investigation they might be able to learn some things about that specific person, but I really don't think that this article is insinuating that the detective thought that Scientology was responsible for this in like some type of cult-like murder, some type of ritualistic murder. It sounds like there's a lone wolf maniac who committed this, and I absolutely don't see anything that's ritualistic about these crimes. Stabbing a man and a woman 60 times, stripping the female victim naked and raping her. This sounds like a sexual predator, and a sexual predator who has sociopathic or psychopathic tendencies. And ultimately, that's where I'm going to leave it at for now, and I would like to just follow up with some challenge question for you guys. Number 1. What do you think about the possibility of multiple killers in the Zodiac mystery, and what do you think about Kevin Fagan's dismissal of that, just saying, no, it's ridiculous, and specifically that there was not a single Zodiac, but it was an unconnected group murder? I would also like to know your responses to that. Question 2, do you believe that the Z at the bottom of the loose leaf letters, the Bates Had to Die letters, is in fact a Z, or do you think that it is a different symbol? And I've given you guys some possibilities, but what do you think about that? Number 3, do you believe the murder of Doreen Gul was committed by the Zodiac, or do you think that that was an unrelated crime? I'm taking a hard stance and saying that that is absolutely nothing like the Zodiac's activities. I think the closest crimes that would resemble that in 1969 that are given some strong consideration would be the Snoozy and Furlong murders, but even with them, the Snoozy and Furlong victims were actually stabbed more excessively than Doreen Gul and James, because we just said 50, 60 stab wounds. Kathy Snoozy and Deborah Furlong were stabbed a total of 300 times among them, so that also doesn't necessarily fit the exact amount of overkill. But I guess the final concluding point, though, that I would say is that in regards to this book, One Night in October, I think that there's a difference between aggression and overkill, and I hope that's clear. And I really try to use the point of Ted Kaczynski as somebody who is expressing his aggression, and he definitely is rage-filled and he's being very aggressive, but he's not going to the point of overkill, stabbing somebody 200 times or even 100 times. Ted Kaczynski did this by mailing in the bombs, and the Zodiac Killer did this by shooting victims parked in cars, stabbing them, as well as writing in his letters and making threats to detonate the bus bomb and so on. And the final announcement is that it's been a long time since I had talked about the Zodiac Killer suspect Derek DeSola Price on this channel, and I'm going to give a shout out to AZ Unsolved, who has sent me some things that I'll be exploring for a future episode of Zodiac Monday. And I've mentioned Derek DeSola Price, who was a British-born historian of science and a mathematician. He created something called Price's Law, and I'll go into that in a future episode, but just lots of stuff to look out for here on Black Box Online Radio. One more time, you can hit the like button and subscribe if you want, and anybody can write the show at blackboxonlineradio@aol.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My Facebook name is Ned DeHaan. There's also a page for Black Box Online Radio on Facebook, BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram, TikTok, and BuyMeACoffee.com. And you can download the audio version of this program as a pure podcast on Spotify using the names Black Box Podcast or Black Box True Crime. And I will see you tomorrow for True Crime Talk Radio. Good.